The hand came down softly on my shoulder. That was the first thing I noticed, not the words that followed. The hand. It was a Thursday evening in late October, and we were all sitting around the dining room table in my house, the house I had owned for 22 years, the house where I raised my 2 children after my husband passed, the house where every wall held a memory I had earned. The candles were lit. My daughter had made her grandmother's cornbread. My son had driven 4 hours from Nashville to be there. It was supposed to be a good night. My son-in-law's mother reached across the table, and her hand came down on my shoulder the way someone places a hand on a door before they open it. Gentle, deliberate, already decided. Then she smiled at me, and I felt something shift in the room. I want to tell this story the right way, because it matters how you understand it, not as a moment that came out of nowhere, as a moment that had been building for almost 2 years, one small thing at a time, until the whole weight of it landed on my shoulder at my own dinner table. My daughter met my son-in-law at a work conference in Atlanta. She was 34, sharp, running the operations side of my business with more discipline than I ever had. He was 37, good-looking, with an easy laugh and the kind of confidence that reads as warmth until you understand what's underneath it. I liked him at first. I want to be honest about that. He knew how to make you feel seen. He asked questions. He remembered details. He told me once, about 3 months into their relationship, that he had always admired women who built something from nothing, and he looked right at me when he said it. I built my home staging and interior design business from a folding table in my garage after my husband died. I was 41 years old with 2 teenagers, a mortgage, and a grief that sat on my chest like a stone every morning. I did not have the luxury of staying in that grief. I got up. I learned the business. I made mistakes, and I fixed them, and I made more, and I fixed those too. 22 years later, the company was steady and respected, and my daughter had come on board and made it even better. It was ours. It had always been ours. My son-in-law moved into my daughter's apartment 6 months after they started dating. That was their business. Then, about 8 months before the wedding, he suggested they look for something bigger. My daughter mentioned that my house had a finished basement apartment that had been sitting empty since my son moved to Nashville. She asked me if they could stay there temporarily while they saved for a down payment. I said yes. Of course I said yes. She was my daughter. He moved in on a Saturday in March with 3 SUV loads of belongings. I remember standing in the kitchen watching him carry boxes past the window, and I noticed that he carried them like a man who intended to stay. But I told myself I was reading too much into it. People carry things, that's all. The first small thing was the parking spot. I have a 2-car driveway, and I had always parked on the left side. My husband parked on the right. After he passed, I kept parking on the left out of habit, and the right side stayed empty. My son-in-law started parking on the right, which was fine. Then one afternoon I came home from a client meeting to find him parked on the left, my side, and his second car, a car I didn't know he had, sitting on the right. I parked on the street and told myself it was a misunderstanding. I didn't say anything. The second small thing was the mail. I came downstairs one morning and found a name tag on the mailbox. His full name, printed on a little adhesive label, stuck right below mine. I remember staring at it for longer than I should have. It was just a label, but I felt the weight of it in a way I couldn't explain. I still didn't say anything. The third thing was the kitchen. He started buying groceries and rearranging the pantry to match what he brought. He said it was easier to find things that way. He said it with the easy smile, and I smiled back, and inside something tightened. I watch people closely. I always have. It was something my husband used to say about me, that I notice things other people let slide. He meant it as a compliment. He said it protected us. And what I was noticing, in those months, was a pattern. Not a dramatic one. Not the kind that makes people gasp. The quiet kind. The kind where someone rearranges the space around you so gradually that you almost don't notice until the space feels like it belongs to them. His parents started coming on weekends. They lived in Savannah, about 3 hours away, and at first their visits were occasional. His mother was polished in that way that takes effort to maintain. She always brought something: wine, flowers, a candle, and she always commented on the house in a way that sounded like a compliment but landed a little differently. "This is so charming," she said once, standing in my living room with her head slightly tilted. "It has a real vintage quality to it. I had just redecorated that room 6 months earlier. I run an interior design business." She knew that. His father was quieter. He stood at the edges of rooms and watched and nodded. He reminded me of someone doing inventory. By the time the wedding was 3 months away, the visits had become almost weekly. They would arrive Friday evening and stay through Sunday. My son-in-law started referring to the guest room as my parents' room. He said it casually, the way you say something you've been thinking for a while. My daughter didn't seem to notice, or maybe she noticed and decided it wasn't worth a conversation. I don't know. She loved him. I understood what love does to your vision. What I noticed, more than anything else, was how he had started talking about the business. At dinner, he would steer the conversation toward it, asking about clients, about contracts, about whether we had considered expanding. He had ideas. He always had ideas. He started using the word "we" when he talked about it, even though he had never worked a single day inside those walls. "We could approach that demographic differently," he would say. Or, "We should think about the commercial side." My daughter would nod and sometimes agree and sometimes push back, and I would sit there and smile and eat my dinner and think about the word "we." I want to be clear about something. I am not a woman who cannot adapt. I am not a woman who refuses change. I had rebuilt my entire life from scratch once already, and I knew what genuine partnership looked like because I had lived it with my husband for 17 years. What I was watching was not partnership. Partnership, Ale, asks. Partnership waits for an answer. What I was watching did something different. It assumed. The October dinner was my 65th birthday. My son had driven down from Nashville. My daughter had decorated the dining room with photographs, old ones of the family, of the business, of me in my 40s when I was running on coffee and stubbornness. My son-in-law had been pleasant all day. His parents had arrived Friday afternoon and spent Saturday complimenting things in that tilted way of theirs. We sat down to eat around 7. The conversation was easy at first. My son was telling a story about a contractor he had hired who had shown up with the wrong tools for 3 consecutive days, and everyone was laughing, and for a moment I thought, this is good. This is what a family dinner should feel like. Then his mother set down her wine glass. She set it down with a small, careful sound, and the conversation didn't stop exactly, but it shifted, the way air shifts before a storm. She looked at my son-in-law for just a second, and then she looked at me. "Gloria," she said, and she used my name the way people use it when they want to sound gentle about something they've already decided. "We've been thinking, the 4 of us, and we felt that tonight was a good moment to talk about something that's been on our minds." My son stopped mid-sentence. He looked at me. I looked at my daughter, and my daughter looked at her plate. That told me everything. "You've done something remarkable with this house," his mother continued, "and with your business. Really, the resilience you've shown, it's extraordinary. But you're turning 65 now, and that's a milestone. And we've been wondering if you've thought seriously about your next chapter." I didn't say anything. I picked up my fork and set it down again. "There are some beautiful communities in this area," she said, "active retirement communities. My aunt lived in one near Hilton Head, and she said it was the best decision she ever made. You'd have people your own age, activities, everything maintained for you. And with the equity in this house, with the equity in my house," I repeated. She smiled. "It would give you real financial freedom. And it would let the younger generation," she gestured around the table, and the gesture included her son and my daughter, and somehow did not include me. "It would let them establish themselves without worrying about you being here alone." There was a silence that felt like it had weight and temperature. I looked at my son-in-law. He was looking at the table. "I'm not alone," I said. "My daughter lives here. My son is sitting at this table right now." "Of course," she said, still smiling, "but they have their own lives to build. And with the business, well, my son has some wonderful ideas, and it might be easier for everyone if the structure were a little cleaner, less complicated." Less complicated. I have heard a great many things said to me over 65 years. I have heard things said in grief, and in anger, and in love. But I had never before heard someone sit at my table, in my house, eat my food, and suggest that my presence was a complication. My son put down his fork. He did it slowly, the way my husband used to when he was thinking before he spoke. My son is not a loud man. He gets that from his father. He speaks when he has something to say and not before, and when he says it once. He had been sitting across from his brother-in-law's mother for 3 minutes of silence, and now he folded his hands on the table and looked at her. "I'm sorry," he said. "Can you say that again? Because I want to make sure I understood you correctly." She adjusted in her chair. "I'm just saying that at a certain point, you're sitting at my mother's table," my son said, "in my mother's house, at my mother's birthday dinner, and you're suggesting she should sell her home and move to a retirement community so that your son can take over her business." He paused. "That's what I heard. Tell me if I got it wrong." No one told him he got it wrong. My son-in-law opened his mouth. My son looked at him. "I've been watching this for 8 months, my son said. The parking spot, the mailbox, the way you talk about her company like it already belongs to you, the way your parents walk through this house like they're measuring it." He shook his head. "I let it go because I trusted my sister's judgment, but this is not something I'm going to sit here and let happen." My daughter's eyes filled. She was looking at her husband. "I haven't said anything," my son-in-law said, his voice carrying the first edge I had ever heard in it, that wasn't meant with respect. "You've had your parents come into my mother's home," my son said, "and suggest she's an obstacle. That's not respect. That's a plan." He looked at his sister. "How long have you known about this?" She didn't answer, and that silence was its own answer. My son looked at me, and for a moment it was just the two of us, the way it had been in those first hard years after his father passed, when we used to sit at this same table late at night and just be quiet together. "Mom," he said, "I need to tell you something." He told me that 3 months ago, my son-in-law had approached him separately outside my daughter's presence to talk about the business. He had presented it as a business conversation, an investment opportunity. He had asked my son whether he thought I would be open to bringing him on in an official capacity. He had mentioned, in passing, that it might be time to think about transitioning the leadership. He had said, and my son quoted this precisely, "Your mother has earned her rest." I looked at my son-in-law. He had the look of a man who had expected a different sequence of events. He had expected, I understood then, for his mother's speech to land on softer ground. He had expected me to be the woman his mother had described, a woman moving gently toward the edges of her own life, grateful to be relieved of the weight of it. He had miscalculated the room. "I want to ask you something," I said. I kept my voice very even. "When you first came to this house, did you see a woman, or did you see an asset?" He said my name. "Don't," I said. "I want you to think about it before you answer, because I have been watching you for a long time, and I think you are smart enough to know that I already know the answer." He looked at my daughter. She was looking at me. "I need some air," my daughter said quietly. She stood up and walked out through the back door, and the screen door closed behind her with a sound like punctuation. My son stood up. "I was going to wait to say this," he said, looking at my son-in-law, "but given the conversation we're having, that capital investment you called me about last month, the one you needed for the commercial expansion, the one you said you were counting on, that's not happening." My son-in-law's face changed. It changed the way a room changes when the lights go out. "That was a separate." "Nothing is separate," my son said. "You came to me for money behind my sister's back to fund an expansion of a business that isn't yours and won't be, and your mother just sat here and told mine to sell her house. So no. Whatever you were counting on from this family, that's done." My son-in-law's mother started to speak. My son held up one hand, and something about the steadiness of it stopped her cold. "I think it would be best," my son said, "if you finished your evening somewhere else." They left. Not immediately. There was the shuffling of a family in retreat, the avoiding of eye contact, the murmured conversation between my son-in-law and his parents in the foyer that I could hear but did not go to witness. My son-in-law paused at the entrance to the dining room on his way out and looked at me with an expression I still have not fully named. It was not quite guilt. It was not quite anger. It was something in between, the look of someone who had made a calculation and discovered the numbers were wrong. I sat at that table for a long time after they were gone. My daughter came back inside around 9 o'clock. She sat down across from me, in the seat her husband had left, and for a while neither of us said anything. "I didn't know about the money," she said finally. "The conversation with your brother. I didn't know he had done that. I believe you, I said. I knew about tonight. She pressed her lips together. I knew they were going to say something. I told him it wasn't the right time. I told him it was your birthday. She looked up at me. I should have told you. I should have done more than argue about the timing. I looked at my daughter, this woman I had watched grow from a girl who used to sit on the kitchen counter while I talked through business problems out loud, who had taken everything I built and made it sharper, more precise, more ready for the world than I had ever managed to make it on my own. I thought about the months she had spent watching the same things I had watched and saying nothing, and I thought about all the complicated things love asks us to carry in silence, and I did not feel angry at her. I felt tired in a way that had nothing to do with the hour. Why did he think it would work? I asked her. Not accusingly, genuinely. She was quiet for a moment. Because he sees people in terms of what they want, she said. And he decided what you wanted was rest. He decided what I wanted was his success. He built a whole plan around what he thought we wanted, and he never once stopped to ask. That's who he is, I said. I know, she said. And then she said very quietly, I think I've known for a while. She didn't move out that night. It was a process, the way most true things are not a single door closing but a long, careful unwinding. But that night, something was decided, not in a loud way, in the quiet way that real decisions usually happen, when the words have already been said and what's left is just the understanding settling into place like furniture in a room that finally makes sense. My son stayed the rest of the weekend. Sunday morning, we sat on the back porch with coffee, and he told me more about the conversation my son-in-law had tried to have with him, the way he had framed it, the language he had used careful, plausible, built around the premise that my retirement was already understood, already agreed upon, already just a matter of paperwork. He thought I would want the money to be used, my son said. And you didn't? It's your money, he said, as if this were obvious. It was always your money. I never understood how he got confused about that. I thought about the label on the mailbox, the parking spot, the pantry rearranged in the dark while I slept, the way my son-in-law had said we for almost 2 years, softly, casually, insistently, until the word started to feel like a transfer of ownership. I thought about his mother's hand on my shoulder and the weight of it, gentle, deliberate, already decided. Some people, I have come to understand, do not see a woman when they look at you. They see a position, a set of assets, a stage in a sequence they have already mapped out. They study you not to understand you, but to anticipate your absence, to be ready to step into the space you will leave behind. And they are so patient about it, so careful about the warmth they deploy, that you can spend years watching them and still wonder if you're being unfair. I was not being unfair. The company is still mine. The house is still mine. My daughter came back to work with a clarity in her eyes that I hadn't seen in a long time, and we don't talk about that dinner the way you'd expect. We don't analyze it or revisit it or hold it up to the light. We just work. We get up and we work and we make things and we fix what breaks and we move forward, the way we always have. My son-in-law's mother sent me a letter about 3 weeks later. It was handwritten, which surprised me. She said she had not meant to cause offense. She said she thought she was being helpful. She said she hoped I understood that everything she had suggested had come from a place of care. I read the letter twice. Then I folded it and put it in the drawer in the kitchen, where I keep things I don't need to throw away but don't need to look at again. Care does not arrive with a plan already written. Care does not calculate your equity and your absence in the same sentence. Care does not seat itself at your birthday table and tell you that you are a complication. I know the difference between care and strategy. I have been alive long enough, and I have lost enough, and I have built enough to know the difference. My husband used to say that a house was not made of what you put into it, but of what you were willing to protect in it. I didn't fully understand that when he said it. I understand it now. I stood my ground in this house at 65 years old, and I didn't even have to raise my voice. My son did that for me, but I had been standing it for years before anyone else saw that I was. 65 is not an ending. It is not a handoff. It is not a vacancy to be filled by someone with better ideas and younger knees. 65 is 22 years of knowing exactly where I park my car, and whose name is on this mailbox, and which memories live in these walls, and why none of that is negotiable. I had one mother. I raised two children. I buried one husband. I built one company. I am not a complication. I am the whole story.